Last night was the infamous power outage of the 2019 summer research session, so we might as well take this opportunity to check the pump to make sure that the oil levels are okay once everything has been shut down. I can make a separate video for shutdown and then one a little bit later today for pumping it down and starting the system up. I took the soundproof box off and the lid, the protective cover off of the pulley wheels. And we're going to look first at the pump oil levels in this little window, and I don't see any. Well, I can sort of see them in the bottom. So the oil is just a little bit below where it should be. We'll top that off beforehand. Indicates that there's probably not much of a leak. I did have to wait about 5 minutes for this to stabilize and turn the wheel a little bit, so you may have to as well. And also examine this bottom shelf here for oil, and also the ground below the wheel. See if it's slick. If you want to do best practices, you can put a cardboard box beneath it. However, if you just get a little bit of oil on it, that will mask future oil usually, unless there's a pretty big leak. Or in the case of us a year ago, there was a big leak and I just couldn't see it. Yeah, check around. Last time there was an oil leak, it occurred here, and we had to replace that seal. Everything's looking okay, so I think I'm going to start this up fairly soon. When ready to power up the vacuum system, you got to make a couple final checks. The first is to the vacuum gauge. Make sure that it's turned on, and it will be giving you the reading OR. That means over range. We're over, I believe, 730 to 750 torr, which just means we're at atmospheric pressure. You want to make sure that the screw at the side here of the turbo pump is nice and tight, and that all of the fittings connected both to the turbo pump and to the roughing pump are secured. If here and here. And then to start everything up, make sure it's all plugged into the surge protector with the roughing pump, and you're going to hit the switch and it will turn itself on immediately. The pump is strong enough that it should start pulling a vacuum, and we'll do that right now. And you will see the vacuum pressure dipping down immediately. Do this for about 2 hours just to clear out anything and warm the roughing pump up. At this point also, I like to remove the hose from the air outlet. It's because it's going to eject a lot of air initially and has a tendency to blow the hose off, which is, it makes a loud noise. It's pretty startling, so we can put it on now and probably be okay. So the first thing we're going to put back on is the protective shell covering for the wheel, and then we're going to put the cooling unit back on and start it all up. But yeah, right now it's continuing to go down, and everything looks fine from here. As the vacuum is pumping down, it's tempting to watch the vacuum gauge, and especially as it gets to 1 torr, it may start to oscillate. Right now it's been oscillating between 2 and 5. It's going a little bit lower, but we see it going up a little bit there, and as it heads down a little bit more. Ideally, we want this to get to about 5 times 10 to the minus 2 torr before we turn on the turbo pump. But if you spend a lot of time watching this, you may think that something is the matter. But as the pump was shut down, the atmosphere was let back into the system, and this also let in especially background water in the air, and also carbon dioxide and other elements of the lab that will be sticking to the sides of the vacuum wall. And when we see it oscillating up and down, we see those compounds being pulled off of the vacuum walls and into the vacuum system, and that's what's causing the value to go up. And you'll notice that through the course of this 1 minute video that we've gone down as a whole. So try not to think too hard about it, but if you come back after an hour or two and it still hasn't gone down very much, I'd say there might be an issue there. But if you do an overnight and it still hasn't gone down, I'd start seriously looking for leaks. That will be your other large issue. If you want to leak test certain fittings for the roughing pump, just grab a little bit of acetone and start sprinkling acetone on some of the fittings you suspect may be leaking. And if you see a large spike in pressure, then that's where your leak is coming from. But we see this already traveling down through the 10 to the minus 1 territory. Because of its spiking up and down, we want it to be a 10 to the minus 2 at least for a little while, or at least for an hour before we start up the turbo pump. So this has been running maybe for about 5 minutes now. I'm going to give it another hour and 50 minutes before I turn on the turbo. It's been almost 2.5 hours total of the vacuum pulling down, and we have been sitting at 1.45 to the -2 torr, or at least 1 to the -2 torr for about 45 minutes now. So I am ready to turn on the turbo pump. The control box is over here, and if you cycle through the options that we have heating, standby. The standby mode is not what you think it is, by the way, but we also have a rotation speed, actual speed, and these will give you current specs when the machine is live. Here's our hours of operation. This is runtime. This is the amount of time that it estimates it will take to bring it up to running parameters. Its speed switch point, which will be determined later, and the parameter set. So you'll see that there is nothing in here for bringing the pump up to operation, and that's because we have a truncated version of the options presently, so we need to turn those on. I will talk about standby a little bit. The standby mode, when it is set to on, that means the turbo pump is on, but it's at about 66% of its rotational speed. That's its default set point when there are high molecular weight gases. And when we turn on the turbo pump, it's automatically set to the high molecular weight gases. And I think it will eventually bring itself up to about 80% of its rotational speed, so a little bit faster, but we don't have to mess with the standby presently. So if you get a 794, this is parameter set. If you activate this, it will show you all of the options that are available. So I'll try to balance this in order to... In order to turn this on, you need to press both arrows simultaneously, and here it lets us set it to 1. We press them both, or press them both again, and now we're set point 1, and we have a whole lot more options than we did before. So we're going to go to pump station off. We're going to set pump station to on through the same procedure, and that will start the startup protocol on the pump. Apologies if you can't quite see this. All I'm doing is pressing both the buttons, and it forms the arrow. And I take the arrow and set it to on, and I press both the buttons again to initialize it. Change confirmed. Now that the pump is on, we can go over to the vacuum gauge, and we'll start to see it rapidly go down. This tells you that this has started. The fan on the side of the turbo pump is now on. You can feel it rotating. Once we get to the 10 to the -4 range, we're really in the safe zone for the turbo pump itself. If you listen closely, it almost sounds like a jet engine on a runway starting up, though this pump is a lot more quieter than the variant pump, where it's very obvious. Yeah, so we can go back to... Go back over here, go back to 794, and set points again. So now we have our truncated parameters, and then we can see, I can hear the pump from here, but we see the actual speed is going up. I believe it stops at 1800 hertz. It's current drive current. I'm going to do that 80%. Yeah, actually, set rotation speed to 1500 hertz, and it's working its way up there. I think I'll just sit on that actual rotation speed for the time being. But yeah, we're already at 10 to the -5. So once it brings itself up to 100% of its capacity, or at least brings its actual speed up and stops the startup procedure. This is currently a Friday. It's going to run through to Monday. I encourage you to wait at least overnight to let the pump pull down on the insides of the vacuum chamber, just to pull off any water, nitrogen, oxygens that might still be absorbed to the side. You'll notice maybe over the next week the vacuum will get progressively lower over time. That's normal.